The Fed15 podcast is presented by Serving Those Who Serve, a financial planning practice serving federal government employees and retirees all over the country. This podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to be taken as financial advice. All listeners should consult their personal advisors before taking any action. The opinions expressed by our hosts are their own and do not reflect the views, policies, or position of either Raymond James or Serving Those Who Serve. Securities are offered through Raymond James Financial Services, Inc., member FINRA SIPC. Investment advisory services are offered through Raymond James Financial Services Advisors, Inc. Serving Those Who Serve is not a registered broker-dealer and is independent of Raymond James Financial Services, Inc.
Welcome, everyone, to the Fed15 podcast, presented by Serving Those Who Serve. Each week, we discuss the latest news and info that Feds need to know in 15 minutes-ish or less. So whether you're a seasoned federal employee or just starting out in your career, we've got you covered. So grab your coffee, your energy drink, your green juice, whatever gets you going, keeps you going. Kick back, and we will tell you what you need to know but might have missed. We are your hosts. I am Dan Sipe, and I am joined by the extraordinary and exceptional.
Hello, everybody. Or my other well-known moniker, the financial lady.
The financial lady. Absolutely. Yeah, well, that was awarded you by one of the folks in my church group that shared with me. He goes, "Hey, Dan, I watched your podcast by accident." Thanks, I think. And, well, how'd you like it? Oh, the financial lady was good. Glad I didn't ruin it for you.
No way.
No. These are just those moments, Katelyn, where I just say to myself, thank you, Lord, for teaching me humility.
For sure.
It's good for me. It's good for the soul. Well, we've got, folks, again, we are chest deep in what you're going through. We are producing relevant content as fast as we can, researching things as fast as we can to get it out there. We bleed Fed. So we know how hard it is right now, and we are working to try and get you the actionable material as many different ways as possible so that you have what you need to make the best decision for you and your family. If you know my story, it all started with someone in the family that didn't have that. And it doesn't matter how smart you are. It doesn't matter how gifted you are. It doesn't matter how dedicated you are. If you don't have the data, you have a chance of making a decision that you would wish you hadn't. And that's what we're trying to head off for every single Fed. So that's why we're here. And that's why we're covering the things that we're covering. So, Katelyn, what do we have up for this week?
Yeah, so we've got a couple pieces on the blog this week, sort of related to kind of everything, obviously, that's going on. We are not real benefits education heavy this week, but we're more looking at kind of managing the transition period that many folks are facing right now. So we've got a great piece on managing the stress and the human element of the return to in-office work.
Sure.
Many folks are a couple weeks into their commute by now, and, they may be wearing fins. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And then Dan's going to talk with us later on about private sector jobs for federal employees. So kind of what to look at with the public to private shift, if that is something that you are tackling currently. So first, just to touch on, and I know we've done, a little bit of coverage here of the transition of having to pick up the commute again and returning to in-office work.
Sure.
A little bit of background information. On January 20th, an executive order was signed requiring federal employees to return to the office. Pretty broad reaching. There are some very, very, very small categories of folks who are not included, but for many Feds, this ends the extended period of remote work, which does introduce new challenges both on the professional side and the personal side. So this piece that's on the blog this week is really kind of approaching that. We've approached that from a financial mindset of, how do you budget for picking up a commute that you didn't have before, that you maybe haven't had for a couple of years or maybe even longer than that. This piece is really approaching it from the human side. So how to kind of deal with that change. Now, one thing that I've mentioned before on the podcast, my background is in financial psychology. And one thing that we know from the field of psychology is that all change is traumatic change, whether it's good change or whether it's bad change. As human beings, change is not something, although it is one of the only constants in life, it is something that from an evolutionary perspective, we've struggled with, right? So change does not necessarily feel comfortable to us all times. And this is definitely one of those moments. So some things that you want to work through kind of on the internal side, acknowledge your feelings. You might have mixed emotions. Some
Sure.
folks might be excited about returning to in-office work. It does present additional in-person socialization opportunities, things like that. But there's also anxiety and stress that can accompany a transition like that. So identifying and acknowledging your feelings is the first step in managing that stress effectively. And you can talk to, if you've got a therapist that you talk to on a weekly basis, you can certainly talk about that there. You can talk about it with family and friends. Or if you're less of a talky type person, you could try journaling about it just to kind of sort out those feelings. Identifying feelings is kind of the first step to not allowing them to take the wheel, right? Once we can identify and label something, it makes it a little bit easier to deal with. The next thing you want to look at doing is setting a realistic routine. So reintroducing in-office routines. This might mean adjusting your wake-up time, working on commuting habits, working on meal schedules in advance. There's, meal prep that often goes into going into the office, especially if you don't want to be going out for lunch every day, which a lot of people don't. You want to try to incorporate daily self-care. That's exercise, meditation. I know it's hard to get the exercise in with the commute, but, try to get it where you can. And meditation, a little bit easier because you can do things like a 5-minute guided meditation. Don't do it while you're driving on 495, please. And lastly, you want to try to simplify your schedule on in-office days to prevent overwhelm. This does mean kind of rebalancing some things, talking with your spouse, talking with your family about maybe changing up the schedule from what things maybe have been before. It's helpful if you can try to reframe this transition as an opportunity. Again, I mentioned in office work, in-person work does offer an opportunity to have better collaboration and social connection with your colleagues. You can, in some cases, increase your focus and productivity with fewer at-home distractions. I know that comes with chatty office mates who maybe aren't as focused on productivity. And then there is greater visibility for professional development and engagement and kind of cross-team collaboration. So don't lose sight of kind of the silver lining. That can be helpful. You want to try to leverage this opportunity to create a healthy work-life balance. Establish boundaries for your work hours to avoid burnout. Believe it or not, research shows that is actually easier to do in an in-office environment rather than a remote environment. It's really easy to just take 5 seconds and check Teams or take 5 seconds and check your email here and there. I know I'm guilty of that too. Setting those boundaries can actually be more helpful when you have that commute as transition time, mental transition time. Lastly, you want to focus on what you can control, leverage your technology to stay connected, and above all, prioritize your mental and physical health. That's going to be important in this transition. And you also want to make sure you're seeking support when needed. There are agency-provided EAPs for mental health support. You can consider financial counseling if that transition affects your household finances. For example, if you're going to have to change your schedule so dramatically that maybe one spouse is going to have to not work. Obviously, that's going to impact things massively, and you want to make sure that you've got a plan for that. If you're facing a transition like that and you don't have a personal financial planner that you work with, I would recommend maybe reaching out to Serving Those Who Serve. We would love to help you get your hands around that transition and figure out how you can best navigate that. But yeah, if you're somebody who's struggling with kind of adjusting, I know we've been in it for a little while now, but if you're still struggling with adjusting to that commute, maybe check out that piece on the blog this week. It's called Managing the Stress of Returning to In-Office Work, a Guide for Federal Employees. Highly recommend. Now, Dan, you're going to talk to us about a little bit of a different type of transition as far as public to private shifting.
Sure. But before we jump into that, Katelyn, I want to acknowledge something. You just gave me a great gift. I've tried journaling so many times and always struggle with it. And so I guess that means I'm a talky person.
You might be.
Yeah.
You might be.
Yes.
There's a really interesting form of journaling, actually, because I struggle with it too, because I'm at kind of like well, you know this about me. I'm a type A person. And so like if I'm journaling, that means I have to journal every day. And I don't have time to journal every day. And then often I'll like not journal for several days and then I'll sit down and need to write like everything. So there's an interesting kind of hack. If you are a more talky person, you can use voice notes on your phone.
Sure.
And just kind of voice to text it or just speak it aloud as a recording. And then you've got the recordings, should you ever want to go back. But most of journaling, 95% of the work is just getting it out.
Sure.
So that's something to consider as well.
And I will throw one last little thought into that back to office transition, because this is going to sound really weird, folks, because one of the biggest things that was a massive disruption for me when we had the COVID shutdown is I have always been an audiobook person. And so I bought into that early from a motivational speaker named Brian Tracy that said you can get university levels of education during the time that you're in your car. And that made sense to me. So don't sleep on the value of commuting time to absorb while you're doing things, whether they be related to your career, your personal performance, your well-being, new hobbies, interests, things like that. That was something that I really missed when it was taken away. And so I would be remiss if I didn't sprinkle that back in. So now let's jump into, if you're transitioning to the private sector, we know that the RIF has affected a whole lot of people. Estimates show maybe 12% of the workforce, and there could be more reductions. Uncertainty is high, but for many people, the private sector opportunities are a viable path forward. But as you're making their public to private shift, you almost need to go through some translation because your federal title may not align in any way to a public sector role that a hiring or a screening person would be able to understand. So you need to kind of step out and think outside the box. For example, an executive officer could be a chief of staff or a VP in the private sector. Different workplace goals. The private sector is going to prioritize things like audience growth, market share, the revenue, whereas agencies will focus on policy impact, providing services, and compliance. So that's a mind shift and that's a language shift. So, for example, if you have been a director within your agency, you need to think in terms of expressing how you were a results-oriented leader that consistently delivered those results on time, on budget, things like that. As something to think about that's not related to the translation is you're going to be changing your benefits here. So your TSP contributions will stop, but the account remains intact. If you're under 5 years, you are not yet vested in receiving a first pension, but that doesn't mean you lose those contributions. And if you've read or listened to or watched any of the things from us, we encourage you not to run right out and withdraw those because you may be able to return and get that pension. Talk to a Fed specialized CFP on that, just period. Okay. Find somebody with decades, not decades singular, multiple decades of experience in that area. Now getting back to moving over, highlight those transferable skills. Okay. So what are the top ones that translate from public to private sector? Decision making, problem solving, leading change, building relationships, managing finance and budgeting. Two different ways to make an organization more profitable: increase the top line or reduce the middle expenses to help that bottom line. Update that resume. It may look great for moving around within federal service or moving up to an SES position. It's probably not going to translate. So you need to rewrite. It's essential to highlight outcomes, impact, and relevance to corporate goals. Here, folks, I am a huge believer in if there are experts to assist, they are worth the investment. So for a lot of folks, it may be worth your while to engage a professional resume writer who has expertise in landing people in the private sector. It could save you a ton of time and actually save you money by getting you a job sooner. They're going to talk about the things that need to be in there that are going to resonate with a screener or a corporate hiring person. But also, they're going to know what keywords you need to put in there so that you're findable out on the net. Another thought, use your network. Okay, right now, if you're finding out that you've been riffed, you're kind of thinking small. How's this going to impact me? And that's reasonable. But you have other people who have been riffed. Start reaching out, see where they landed. See if there's another spot there. If there's not another spot there, take a look at the type of organization that it is. And then see what need they filled there. Go to a similar organization. And this is where, platforms like LinkedIn can be exceedingly valuable for referrals and advice. Get back out into your industry groups. Okay. If you haven't going to networking events, do it. Okay. Don't be bashful about investing in your professional growth. So think outside the box. If there are certifications that you can get that are valuable in the private sector, I know the last thing you want to hear is, oh my goodness, I'm about to lose my job. And this joker's telling me to invest in a certificate program. It could repay you tenfold. Okay. So career transition steps that you can take right now. The current climate does present challenges. And strangely enough, the private sector employment might actually offer greater stability right now, in addition to new opportunities. To prepare, get that resume up to date, build those skills, get your financial planning in order. Okay, know your numbers, know what you need for living in your world, and to keep moving towards the future that we all know you deserve. Keep coming back here. We're going to keep digging into this. Katelyn, as I was preparing for this, I've actually, found some places that are talking about that they do this type of coaching. I'll make the commitment here. I'm going to reach out to them and see what's what. And if they look like they're promising, maybe we'll see if we can get them on a podcast, because we want to make sure that we're doing the things that matter to you right now. That's why we're here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, that's all the time that we have for today, folks. But we're going to be back next week to bring you all the latest updates you need to make informed decisions about your career and financial well-being as a Fed.
And be sure to subscribe to this podcast. Only about 72% of you aren't. You thought I was going to say 70% of you were, didn't you? Help me out. Let's get that under 70. Okay. Think of it like a telethon for an old man who might be dead tomorrow. So please help us get over that number. No, seriously, it helps you because then you know when our latest things drop, but also it's going to help all of your friends without you lifting another finger, because it will tell the YouTube algorithm, for example, that we're important to Feds, and they will show it to people. So if you feel we've helped, please do that. And also on your own, please remember to share this with friends and colleagues.
For more information on the topics covered in today's show and more, so much more, be sure to check out our blog at blog.stwserve.com. While you're there, you can subscribe to our newsletter, The Weekly Serving, to get all the latest news for Feds delivered straight to your inbox every week.
And don't forget our live webinars. We've got them going pretty much every single week. Two, for which you should give serious consideration, would be our first webinar on June 4th. From 11 till 2, featuring extraordinary, exceptional Katelyn Murray. And then the day later, we have tax. Oh boy, everybody wants to talk about taxes right now, but it's never too early to get started for next year. And that's from 1 till 4. And for that, you're stuck with me. And if you are looking for an even more personalized approach, hit us up at meetings@stwserve.com. And we are happy to be your webinar and take you through what you need to know, help you understand things, and see how we can help.
For sure. I'll add just one note on the tax thing. I know it feels like we just did a bunch of tax stuff, but we've only got 7 months until the end of the year. And a lot of your tax moves are made, even though we file taxes April of the next year. A lot of your tax moves need to happen in the calendar year. So, we're almost halfway there. to December 31st, which is wild. But we're not going to think about that because we're at the beginning of summer and it's going to last forever. Anyway, thanks for listening to the Fed15, everybody. I'm Katelyn Murray.
And I'm Dan Sight.
And we will see you next week.
Halfway there, living on a prayer.